This is how you cross over from Israel to Gaza, and right now we're in no man's land. Prime Minister, do you now regret when once asked what your favourite joke was, you replied, Nick Clegg? And Deputy Prime Minister, what do you think of that?
Mr. Trump, why should you be president? What makes you fit for the role? Is it just one big ego trip?
Thank you very much.
People aren't sure they can trust what you say. You say things and then it turns out that they're not quite what you said.
And if we deliver what we say we're going to deliver.
My name's Andy Bell, and I've been a journalist for over 30 years. In this podcast series, How Did We Get Here?, I ask a contributor to provide context and background to a big story in the news. This week, I'm in Washington, where Joe Biden is officially president-elect, but Donald Trump is refusing to concede, insisting there's been electoral fraud and he will prove it in court. I've been speaking to Carol Laham, constitutional lawyer and political campaigns expert. At her home in Chevy Chase outside the Capitol, I began by asking her on what grounds Donald Trump might be able to bring a case.
Well, I think he thinks he has many cases. There's not one single case because in the U.S., every state has its own laws about how to run an election. And he is going state by state filing cases. So he's got a case in Pennsylvania, some cases in Michigan, I think. He's going to have a recount in Wisconsin. He's got cases in Nevada and Arizona and potential cases in Georgia. So it's not one single case.
But is it based on the idea that the system has failed, that there's some sort of fraud going on?
Well, that's what he's been saying. And in each case, he has to prove whatever allegation it is for that state's law. So, for instance, let's take Pennsylvania, which is the one that's been going on the longest. So in Pennsylvania, he's saying that no ballots should have been counted after November 3rd because state law actually said the ballots had to be in by November 3rd. But that case went to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and they allowed 3 extra days for the ballots to come in. They had to be postmarked by November 3rd, but they could come in by November 6th. And he is saying that nothing after November 3rd should have been counted. So that's sort of the most concrete case. And that case actually has a constitutional component to it.
I mean, it sounds like he has a bit of a case there.
He could have a case there, absolutely, because the Constitution says that the state legislatures are supposed to decide how the state elections are supposed to be run. And he's saying the courts aren't supposed to decide in that particular instance. So he may well have a case there.
And Pennsylvania was the state that put Joe Biden over the 270.
That's right. That's right. So if the Supreme Court decides to take that case, he may be able to get Pennsylvania reversed if there are enough votes that came in between November 3rd and November 6th to make a difference. We don't know how many votes came in between November 3rd and November 6th, but we do know that the Supreme Court told all the state counties to segregate the ballots that came in after November 3rd.
So you would be able to tell.
So they would be able to tell, exactly.
So at this stage, where is that case? Who has got to make the next decision on that?
So that case is sort of pending before the Supreme Court. It went to the Supreme Court early. They decided 4-4 not to expedite the case. In the past week, the Trump campaign has tried to intervene in that case because they have an interest, obviously. And so it's still before the Supreme Court, and they will have to make a decision about whether or not to take the case.
And why would they take the case, or maybe why would they not want to take the case?
So courts are reluctant to get involved in elections. So they would only take the case, I think, if it would make a difference in the actual outcome of the election. The problem for the president is that there are other states in play. So, for instance, if both Nevada and Arizona get called for Joe Biden, Pennsylvania's not going to make a difference. Or if Georgia is also called for Biden, Pennsylvania won't make a difference. So the Supreme Court's going to be looking at whether or not the case will have precedential value, and whether or not it will matter in the actual outcome of the election before they decide whether or not to take it.
Okay, so Pennsylvania sounds like it's the biggest one, or the one where there's the most grounds. Can you sum up some of the others and see what you think of the merits of those cases?
So the other cases all seem to be about the administration of the election, right? That the observers couldn't get close enough to actually observe, that there was something wrong with the counting machines, that in, I think, Nevada, the objection is that everybody got a ballot whether or not they asked for a ballot, and so people who were either deceased or had moved out of state got ballots. And what the Trump campaign is doing now is trying to find actual examples of that having happened, where somebody deceased cast a ballot, or where somebody lived out of state and cast a ballot in Nevada. And they have to find enough people to make their case in order for those courts to overturn those elections.
So they're still searching. As far as we know, as yet, they haven't, necessarily found the numbers that they need.
We don't know what they found one way or the other. I mean, what we know is that they've been spending the weekend trying to get their factual case in order. I think we'll know a lot more tomorrow. They'll be filing affidavits from people, and the courts will take a closer look based on what's before them.
Presumably it's not unprecedented that presidential candidates say, I'm a bit concerned about what happened here, or is it unprecedented for the on the face of it, the losing candidate to say this hasn't worked?
It's not unprecedented at all. I mean, going back to 2000, right? You had the Bush v. Gore case where actually Al Gore had conceded the election and then realized, oh, it's close enough. It's within a few hundred votes, and took back his concession and went to court to try to get the counting changed.
In the end failed?
In the end he did fail, yes. And that went to the Supreme Court. That case wasn't supposed to have precedential value. We'll see whether or not it does this time around if a case ends up in the Supreme Court.
So, I mean, in a way, is Donald Trump, he's doing it with his own style, and he's doing it with his tweets, but it's not completely out of whack in the way that these things might normally play out?
It's not out of whack at all, not in a close election. The question is whether this is a close election. And it is unusual for so many states to be within such a small margin. So I think it's made the map bigger than we would ordinarily look at. So in 2000, we were just looking at Florida. Here, we're going to be looking at Pennsylvania and Georgia and Wisconsin, Nevada. That's highly unusual. We haven't seen that before. But there were hundreds of cases filed before the election over the administration of the election. So for there to be cases after the election makes perfect sense.
So people will look maybe and say, oh, look, Biden got more than 300. We don't know where this is going to end up, 300 electoral college votes. But I guess Donald Trump can say, yeah, but in each state, which put him over the edge, the margins of the votes in those individual states were very small.
That's exactly right.
And that's why it's worth challenging.
Right. And, any candidate who thinks they won would be doing what Donald Trump is doing. What's different here is that Donald Trump is very litigious, that he's using tweets to make his case to the public. And it feels different, but I don't think it is actually different.
And crucially, do you think it could be enough to actually change the result of the election? The election's, on the face of it, being called. We've got foreign leaders congratulating Joe Biden. Could it really change the result?
I think anything's possible, right? If Trump has the facts behind him, the courts will agree with him. If he doesn't have the facts behind him, they won't agree with him. It's really all a matter of where's the evidence and where does it take you.
But how long will that take?
It won't take long. And the reason it won't take long is that we know January 20th is the end of the first term. So between now and January, everything will be litigated. Chances are everything will be litigated between now and middle of December, because the Electoral College meets in the middle of December. And typically, you would have the court decisions done by then.
So for people sitting at home thinking Joe Biden is going to be president, right? Mm-hmm. What would you say to them?
I would say that they should wait until the Electoral College actually votes, because, you know, the press can call the election, but it's not over until all the ballots have been certified by every Secretary of State, and that hasn't happened. And then the Electoral College votes. That's when the president is actually elected. And then on January 6th, the Congress will meet and review the vote of the Electoral College.
But it would be amazing, wouldn't it? After what we've seen in the last 48 hours.
There's no question. It would be amazing, but it's not beyond possibility.
The $64,000 question, or even more, that people will be asking is there some way that Donald Trump, through this litigation, could end up staying as president?
He could end up staying as president if he wins multiple cases from multiple states. And they all have to end up, I think, probably in the Supreme Court. Although right now, the only one before the Supreme Court is Pennsylvania. And I don't think that alone will get him over the hump.
But if he were to win all those, and therefore reverse the decision,
then he could be president. And that's what he's trying to do. He believes he's won. So he's fighting it out.
Carol Laham telling me that while it might not be entirely hopeless, Donald Trump is facing an uphill battle. By the time you hear this, some of what she told me may have been overtaken by events. If you've enjoyed this or have ideas for other podcasts, you can email me at andy.bell@itn.co.uk, and I'm tweeting at AndyBell5News. And please feel free to share, rate and review. Thanks for listening to this edition of How Did We Get Here? There'll be another along soon.